Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Foster Files, a podcast about animal rescue and welfare. My name is Kelly, and every week I talk about issues surrounding animals in this country and to the people who are passionate about making their lives better. Talking with us today is Tawny Hammond, Director of No Kill Advancement at Best Friends Animal Society. Her work at Best Friends focuses on public conversations about how animal services fit into effective and modern local government. Hi, Tawny. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Good morning, Kelly. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I'm super excited to be with you.
Ah, I am also super excited. So, one of the things that you guys will be able to see in the podcast show notes for this episode is a link to Tawny's TED Talk about a lot of the content that we're going to discuss today. So, if you can't get enough of her, like I can't, make sure that you listen to that. But Tawny, I'd like to kind of start with talking about your background in kind of societal welfare, government, legislation, and then how that transitioned you into working with Best Friends.
Yeah, um, I spent about 25 years in public service. I was in primarily parks and recreation leadership and management. I started off in Oak Park, Illinois, ended up in Fairfax County, Virginia, and had been looking at animal services. Um, I did an internship in the county executive's office, and that opportunity had come up, and I'd always had an interest in animals my whole life, and it piqued my curiosity. I was doing research on it, and when the opportunity came up later, I was invited to apply, and I jumped at the opportunity. So it was a switch. I went from a field of parks and recreation, um, municipal parks and recreation to animal services. And it was interesting. I have to say that there was a lot of um, common ground, and one of it being I saw it was tied to societal wellness and well being and community. And hopefully we'll get into that a little bit here. I won't get into it because it was also an area that I saw that we needed to strengthen. But I saw the
Yeah.
potential there. And then also too, just for professional excellence and governance excellence, I saw an opportunity for improvement. But people love their parks. People are crazy about them. It's very political, and people are very opinionated. In animal services, we think we're the only ones that have people telling us how to do our job, criticizing us for everything we do. Mm-mm. It happens in police, fire, parks. And so coming into animal services, people are passionate about their pets, and as they should be.
How long have you been in the animal services space?
Um, I was in the animal services, and animal welfare as a movement, animal services as a profession. In that space, towards the end of my parks career, starting with Katrina, I started working very closely with the shelter and doing events for them at a large municipal park that I managed. It was 500 acres, had all kinds of recreational amenities, was really kind of the crown jewel of the community just outside of Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia. And so I
Mhm.
started working with the shelter, started offering free, or I started offering a program for uh, training classes. I hate saying dog training because it's really about training people. But
Mhm.
classes for people that adopted pets, if they took the class, they got their money back. So if they completed the class, so it was essentially a scholarship opportunity for people that adopted from the shelter. So I had fundraisers, went in and did projects at the shelter. But formally, I entered into the field as the director of the shelter in 2011, 2012, and then ended up as the director in Austin, Texas. And before I came to Best Friends, I've almost been with Best Friends a decade. I just celebrated my 9 years. So I would say about 15 years.
So I love that idea because, I've talked before on the podcast about the reason that animals that are recently adopted get returned, and there's a lot of different reasons for that, but oftentimes we can see a common thread. And one of those reasons is that communication between the behavior that the human expects or wants of the animal versus the behavior the animal is actually exhibiting and capable of. So I love this idea of, well, listen, we support this adoption for life, and we want it to go well. So we're going to give you the tools to have this great relationship with your animal. And if you accept those tools and you go through this class, we're going to incentivize you by returning the adoption fee. I mean, certainly there needs to be a lot of fundraising behind that, but that's such a
Sure.
great concept, and a great resource for people who might not otherwise be able to afford training or might not otherwise think that training is important. And then this gives them a reason to accept it, even if they don't think it's something that they need.
Yeah, 100%. You know, a lot of the behaviors that are concerning about dogs in shelters uh, go away when they get into foster and when they're adopted. And
Hmm.
that's just like across the board. You'll see that time and time again that some of the stress behaviors that these animals are under in this foreign environment and circumstance. You know, think about it. We sanitize it. I mean, they've got these sensitive noses and sensitive ears. And so, you know, you can just imagine how stressed they are from that
Hmm.
perspective, and then emotionally and mentally. And so, a lot of the behaviors that are concerning about pets in the shelter that have really caused them to lose their lives in the past, we've become a lot more enlightened. We need to be even more enlightened, but those go away in foster. They just
Hmm.
when they're adopted. And so for the behaviors that stay, things that we're concerned about, they're solvable. And so to your point, you know, offering some type of a program and training um, it can really help a family that's bringing in a new being, a new living creature into their home, and who knows what expectations they have or how they were raised. Um, You know, in my family, we're okay with dogs getting on the furniture. You know, we vacuum a lot. We have covers for the sofas and the chairs. Other families, that's like a bozo no, 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 you don't get on the furniture. And
Right.
I'm using a really simple uh example. But
Hmm.
for things like, you know, walking on leash, how they react to other animals, how they react to people coming to your home, you know, all that stuff is behavior modification really is what we're talking about. I don't like the word training so much as I like the behavior incentives. And I personally am about fear-free training.
Hmm.
I think that you know that's the way I would handle my dogs and what I would do. But
Hmm.
these things are solvable. And you know, there's an education process too for people as well as pets. And one example I'll give you, and we can talk about our foster dog later, Donnie. He our little Prince Charming. Um, but it you know it said in his little profile that he resource guarded his person and his toys. Well, I mean, I resource guard my person and my toys, and and
No, that's such a good way to think about it. I literally never put it in that perspective before. I am incredibly protective of the people that I love and the things that I have.
Yeah, I am too. Like, and I'm not being trite. Like, we don't want to put a dog in a stressful situation where for it makes a bad decision. But these things are manageable. Like, for instance, when we have kids in our home, when we had one dog that was at the end of her life, and she was cranky and she was in pain, and we had a toddler, and we taught the toddler leave puppy alone.
Um,
Puppy's hips are killing her, her back hurts her, her vision is going. When a dog is eating, you let that dog eat. This whole notion of you should
mhm,
be able to put your hand in its bowl. You know, I totally understand that as its person, you want it to trust you and you can work on those behaviors. But to make that like, oh, the dog growled or over a bone or a toy, I think that you can work on behavior modification and trust and building a rapport, but we also shouldn't place unreasonable expectations on animals. I think let a dog be a dog, let a cat be a cat,
Mhm.
let people be people, and we behavior shape as much as we can. And it's what I'm saying, most animal lovers totally get.
Well, I mean, I don't think though that it should be one of those things that we don't continue to say and reiterate though, because I think you're right. While a lot of animal lovers understand it or are kind of like me, where they're starting to understand it, like the way that my thought process on interacting with my animals has changed in the last 2.5 years since I've been fostering and then additionally learning from people on this show, is insane. But I had to like kind of unlearn the stuff that I grew up with, right?
Yep.
And so have always been an animal lover, but that doesn't mean that everything that I was doing or everything I was brought up doing was right. And so I had to kind of unlearn those behaviors, unlearn some of those assumptions. And so I think that it is good for animal lovers to hear these things from somebody who's been doing the work for so long, both inside and outside the shelter, hear that different perspective and the benefits of the why behind it.
Yeah, and I want to stress my wheelhouse, my experience is really around political acumen and leadership. I'm not a behaviorist. I'm not a trainer, but I am. I have been in the environment quite a bit, and I work around behaviorists, and I work around trainers, and I work around people that take care of pets. I think here's the bottom line on our conversation here, because I know we veered off into an area that I'm not an expert on. The bottom line is that we have higher expectations for shelter pets. And I think that can become a problem. We expect them to be, bomb proof, and we have these higher expectations which is what I love so much about Dogs Playing for Life, Amy Sadler's program. Let a dog be a dog. Let dogs
Mhm.
just play. Let them, they're going to be naughty. You're going to need to correct for that. So we're not talking about uninterruptible, unprovoked, unpreventable um, aggressions toward human. That's not what we're talking about right here. We're talking about naughtiness.
Right.
We're talking about house training. We're talking about walking on a leash. We're talking about being good with children, being part of a family, and how you can behavior shape for that. So I just wanted to
Mhm.
clarify that for your listeners when they're going to go, "What's Tawny talking about? She's totally out of her lane here."
No, I don't, just because you're not a certified expert doesn't mean your opinion isn't valuable because you do have expertise and experience. And so that is important to get. It's also important to get additional perspective, especially if someone is looking for a solution. Maybe they have a hard foster, maybe they have a hard recently adopted dog, or maybe they've spoken to somebody who does, or somebody who's feeling very challenged by a situation that's going on. It's good to talk to people with experience. It doesn't always have to be an expert. Certainly, if it gets to a certain level, it absolutely should be an expert. But yeah, I think it all makes sense. And it kind of leads into I think it leads into the conversation around no-kill shelters and really what that means and what that doesn't mean. And I think that conversation lately in my world, I have seen that kind of shift and change a little bit. And so why don't you talk to me a little about the work that you do on the no-kill shelter side of things and what no-kill shelter really means to you?
I would love to. I think that no kill animal services essentially is about um, how you make decisions every day and what the outcome of those decisions are. And so, if our goal, Tawny and Kelly are operating a shelter, and this includes animal control, by the way, when we talk about animal services, but we decide that we don't want to kill animals for convenience or lack of resources. Um, we want to end that. And so we backwards engineer, and that means that every day, each week, We're making decisions that support our ultimate goal. And what you call it doesn't matter. When I was in Virginia, we didn't use the words no kill. When I was in Austin, that community was extremely comfortable with those words. And so I found early in my career that it really didn't matter what you called it. What mattered is what you did. And I also learned early in my career that I didn't want to be right. I wanted to get it right. Because once an animal was dead, it was dead. I couldn't bring it back. And so for no kill for me, and I'm boiling this down to the simplest way of thinking because there is controversy around it. I was
Mhm.
looking at social media today, preparing for our next no kill conversation that best friends does, similar to what you're doing here, where we take on the hard questions about what no kill is and isn't, people's fears, their concerns. And they were talking about how no kill has really just evolved into hoarding. And that's not what no kill is about. It's a
Mhm.
life-saving system. It's about keeping pets with their families. You know, in the past, we operated animal services on a punitive basis. We were going to punish people into being responsible pet owners. We were going to levy fines against them when their pets got out of their yard. And if they couldn't pay the fine, we were keeping their animal. And then when we didn't have space for the animal, we were ending that pet's life. And we
Mhm.
were saying, "Oh, our problem is because of people." And so who was losing their life? Who was being punished? The animal was being punished. And the people, do you think they were ever going to come adopt from that shelter? But they were going to get another pet because they loved animals. And so no kill is about making that decision, that ultimate goal, that healthy, treatable, adoptable animals we're going to leave out the front door alive. And so for me, that was really simple for me. I didn't understand there was a no-kill movement when I started in animal sheltering. Someone called us 6 months after we'd been doing what we did at the shelter and said, "Hey, you've been no-kill for 6 months." And I was like, "What?" And they said, "You've been at 90%, your save rate's 90% or better, and you've been maintaining that." And so I came to learn about the no-kill movement and, but for the way I started, Kelly, was really about professional excellence. I mean, we hire people that love pets working in shelters, and they tell us these amazing stories of how a pet saved their life when they were a child, or when they were dealing with these horrible situations growing up, or in school, or health concerns, or violence in their home, or losing a parent, and being sick, and they talk about pets, and they say how they raise their rabbits, and they love their cats, and love their dogs. I'm like, great, you're hired. And then we let them know that part of their job is ending the lives of animals because, we got to empty out kennels so we're ready to go on Monday. And so we ask them to do the unthinkable. And then we normalize it, we institutionalize it. We call it putting to sleep, or we call it euthanasia when it's not euthanasia. And we don't call it what it is. And I'm not suggesting that we throw around the K word. I think that we should be honest though and say that we're ending a pet's life. We're ending that pet's life. And it's not because it's sick, and it's not because it's a danger to society. Unpredictable, unprovoked, uninterruptible aggression to humans. Because, that's part of our job too. And animal services is about creating a safe community and not being part of creating an unsafe community. And so we have to make those hard decisions. But I think being accurate is extremely important. Best friends, our take on no kill is that 90% of the animals coming into a shelter are leaving alive. That leaves for 10% that are irremediably suffering. And euthanasia, true euthanasia, using the dictionary definition, being accurate, which other professions do, fire, police, health department, parks, schools, everybody else is accurate. Let's be accurate. And that leaves for 10% of pets that we just simply can't find life-saving solutions for, or it wouldn't be fair to that animal or to the community. So it's a reasonable metric. And it's happening all around the country. I mean,
I'm really
that
surprised by you saying that it doesn't matter what you call it. Like when you say like no kill, the terminology doesn't matter because I wonder I guess I'm just surprised by that because I do think that perception is incredibly important in today's society, right? The way that things are presented
Nope.
can influence and change the way that people respond to these things. And so I've seen myself in the comment section of social media is always going to be just like toxic and full of nonsense. But it's interesting to me when you see kind of your own language used against you a little bit, like, oh, I follow Austin Pets Alive, which if you were in Austin, you're 100%, you know exactly the organization I follow. I had Cam on the podcast. He's incredible. I really the behavior work they do is incredible. But one of the reasons that I like Cam's profile so much, it does a dangle, is because he will bring to light the fact that there are animals that it's just kind of just the
Mhm.
end of their time. And oftentimes there is a behavior issue surrounding it or whatever. But then you look at the
Yep.
comments and people are going, well, I thought you guys were no kill, or I thought you guys were intending to be no kill. And so I wonder if there is an opportunity for some language clarification around that, just so that people do understand that no kill is really 90%. I don't know. I guess I'm just trying to organize my thoughts around it because I do think when we say no kill, people think that there's no pet that's ever going to lose its life in the system. And the reality is different from that. And it has to be different from that for all the reasons that you just explained.
Yeah, one thing that we need to remember that's real important, Kelly, is that we are not a discipline yet. We're a field and we're a profession, but we're not a discipline. Because if we were a discipline, you wouldn't have such disparity in how cities and counties operate across the country. Where you
Mm.
are on the map, or what city you're in, what county you're in, how animal services are implemented can be vastly different from even the county next door or
Oh,
the
yeah, for sure.
city down the road. And so, I mean, that's one of the things Best Friends is working on with Southern Utah University is creating an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree. We already have the master's degree, and that is making it a discipline. Because imagine your house catches on fire, my house catches on fire. God forbid, the fire department shows up, same color truck, same uniform, same equipment, same techniques in putting the fire out, and the same protocols and standard operating procedures. It is a discipline. You go to an academy and you learn that discipline. You learn um, how to do that. And same thing with being a teacher. You're certified. You're certified. You get your degree in teaching. And same thing with parks. I would go to a national conference every year, one conference. And then and each state had their own association of parks and recreation. And there's clarity. And so animal services is in its infancy stages. It had this huge surge in the 80s. I mean, we were killing 20 million animals. And now we're down, if we look at our best friends, our statistics, and no national statistics existed until we pulled it together. We're just over 400,000. So we're,
Mhm,
under 500,000, and we're getting
mhm.
there. And the reason I bring that up is because we will become a discipline. And I hope it happens in our lifetime. I really do, because we are evolving fast. The controversy around the words no kill um, and no kill sheltering is very much at the center. Like all social change, the fear, the mayhem, the misrepresentation, the rumors, the concerns, the questions, and not all questions and concerns are bad. When I was questioned by advocates and activists when I was a shelter director, it might have felt uncomfortable because sometimes people were really rude and they made it personal. But I always looked for the truth and the criticism and the complaint, because I had something to learn. If we've got to like take our ego away. That's why I said we need to set it aside. That's why I said, it's really important for successful leaders in animal services to worry about getting it right instead of being right. Because some of these criticisms that we're seeing, I'm not talking about the crazy stuff where it's just so outlandish, but some
Mhm.
of it, there's like a shred of of something we should be listening to, um,
Mhm.
and tracking and taking it to heart and striving to do better. But we're not yet a discipline. And going back to the words no kill, I said, there's some people that are really hung up on the words. Personally, I think it's genius marketing. We took the two most negative words, no and kill, smushed them together, and it's a movement. But it's genius marketing, and I'll tell you why. Because the community understands it and gets it. And really, that's all that matters. What you and I think really doesn't
Mhm.
matter.
I
What do
know.
people
Yeah.
what do people going on and on social media about with their opinions, the keyboard experts, your opinion doesn't matter. What matters is my community's opinion. And the community expects their shelter not to be killing animals. Period. End of story.
Mhm.
And they will give you money. They will open their checkbooks up. That's why I say genius marketing. They will go, what? You don't kill animals for space? I'm adopting from your shelter. I'm volunteering at your shelter. I want to get behind that. That's something I can get behind. And so we need to use it to our advantage instead of belly aching about it. The world according to Tawny.
Well, that's what we're here to learn about, right? The world according to Tawny. Tell
Uh,
me how you define and how you understand the relationship between a shelter or a rescue and the community around it, and why that relationship and that is so important. That connection is so important. How does one impact and influence the other?
Kelly, that is such a good question. Um, it's huge. You can't have a no-kill shelter without the community. In fact, Best Friend's approach to this is we look at the community holistically. In many communities, there's a municipal shelter and there are nonprofit organizations that support that shelter. And so we look at the community as a whole. I mean, a community can't be considered no kill if the municipal shelter is, and there are communities like this. It's becoming kind of odd where the municipal shelter is at 90% or better. And then down the road, there's a SPCA that, is saving like maybe 50% of the animals. They have a totally different viewpoint on, on animal services, or vice versa, for that matter, if it's a municipal shelter. So the community's paramount, and because you can't do this without the community. Your community are your fosters. Your community are your donators, people that are going to donate. Your community are the people that are going to come out and walk dogs and volunteer and help answer phones and be greeters in the lobby. Um, and hopefully we can talk a little bit about managed intake because what there's a lot of heat around that and a lot of uh, consternation and confusion around what it is. And I'd love to talk about that. And because what made me think of it is the volunteers and the adoption and the lobby and the greeters. But the community is a huge part of that because your life saving is not within your four walls. Your life saving is in the community. When I was in Austin, we were at capacity when I got there, and um, a drought had just ended. And so I was dealing with flooding and emergencies, and we were having to set up pop up crates and emergency sheltering throughout the facility. And we had pop up crates in the hallways and in offices. And, when I left Virginia, I had empty kennels. I was moving pets in from rural Virginia that were being killed for space. I was bringing puppies, beautiful puppies in. Every Saturday was puppy day. Um, and, we also were doing, making sure animals were being spayed and neutered. We didn't want this endless faucet. Spay neuter is an important part of the life saving equation. It's just not the only part of the life saving equation.
Mhm.
It's part of the toolkit. But anyhow, these little pups, if they didn't hunt, they were just left out in the field. And so we were bringing them in on Saturdays, and so we had empty kennels. I left a system where we were being successful, and we had taken the pressure off of us. We weren't at capacity, so I came to Austin. We were at capacity, and I got right on TV, called up the local station, did 3 or 4 interviews. There was multiple stations, just like any community. Print media, but TV media is really powerful. Had the cameras with me, with those kennels behind me. Before I went home that night, there wasn't a pet in a pop-up crate. That's community. And
Yeah.
that's being done all around the nation because shelter directors or shelter leadership, animal services leadership, they're realizing they're not alone. The community expects you to be a life-saving organization, and they will support you if you ask. And I find that the shelters that are often at capacity are posting on social media, and it's always an emergency, and the sky's always falling. And we have to remember our Facebook page, our Instagram page, those are closed populations. People have to like you and follow you to know about you. And
Mhm.
so when you're just constantly just sounding the alarm, this animal's going to die, we're at capacity, you've got to expand your reach. You have to get out there to other organizations, um, nonprofits, the business community. The best thing that, animal leadership can do is be involved in the business community because that's something that, particularly in Austin, communities wanted to fund. They wanted to fund the supplies we needed. They wanted to have their employees come out and volunteer and be part of the foster program. So you're only as strong as your community. You cannot do it alone. You're not the Alamo. You can't hunker down and fight it by yourself.
It's also kind of that perspective of like, if it's always an emergency, it's never an emergency. So
Mhm.
that idea, there's one rescue in our area that pulls from euthanasia list in Texas. And I'm not sure what area you specifically you're in, but I'm in Western Pennsylvania. And so a lot of different nonprofits in the area pull from the South. And so they pull, but every single post I see is like 48 hours before this pet's going down. And I know that that is simultaneously a reality, but I also know that it's like even me personally, I'm like, "Oh, like, this is another one. This is another one." Like, when I first saw them, it felt, like, urgent, and then now it's like, well, it's kinda always urgent, so it's not urgent. I don't know how to
Yeah.
explain that any better,
Yeah.
but I see what you mean too. It's like you gotta kind of get out there and make those connections, then ask for help when you need from help and ask for support because this is a group effort on both the front end of I want to get into what managed intake means to you, and then on the back end of really truly being a no kill shelter or nonprofit. And so let's talk about managed intake because you brought that up, and I want to talk a little bit about your perspective about what managed intake is and what it isn't.
Yeah. I'd love to. Um, you know, before before we started doing something like managed intake in Virginia and in Texas, um, we really it really was managed chaos. You really couldn't plan your day. It was no way to manage resources. Um, to your point, if everything is an emergency, um, then nothing really is. And so every
Mhm.
single time an animal came to us, the notion, and I hear this a lot, we have to accept the animal. Well, usually that's not true. It's not a have to. It's, and I think people that insist upon that, they need to stop just for a minute and not want to be right. And they need to stop for a minute and want to get it right and have an open mind and what a new possibility would be. The bottom line, when we talked about no kill simplistically, managed intake simplistically is about triage. Just like when you go to the hospital, you come in, No, they don't usher you back to a room and then call in a bunch of doctors to look at you. They don't give you a room right away and take you up. The blood pressure, your pulse, they interview you, they ask what's going on. It's a triage process. And so really what that comes down to is that's what managed intake is. Because, think about it. When people come into shelters, they come in, they've steeled themselves to finally be there with their pet. And we've told people for decades and decades and decades to find a pet, bring it to the shelter. Can't keep your pet, bring it to the shelter. It's just like this social norm, this truth, this universal truth that we've taught. Change your smoke detectors on New Year's Eve, or pick an annual date. Stop, drop, and roll, and recycle. Give a hoot. Don't pollute. Find a pet, bring it to the shelter. And fact of the matter is, and we know this statistically, that an animal being in a shelter is probably one of the most dangerous places it can be in its life. That, and like in the middle of a freeway, or
Mhm.
being in a horrible abusive situation. Um, but it's probably one of the most dangerous places that a pet can because it might do something foolish behaviorally, or it's stressed, or it's going to get sick. It's in a closed population. There's like no way of medical isolation in an animal shelter. And so it's not the best place for pets necessarily. Um, and so managed intake is about that triage process, having a conversation, just like in the adoption lobby. Just like when we meet with people, so many shelters, so many animal services organizations are good now, getting better about not making people run the gauntlet to adopt a pet. Instead of, an 18-page application, now it's a information form, and it's a conversation. Instead of, asking them for, all their pets' vet records and calling the landlord, it's we open adoption, barrier-free adoptions, not making people prove their worth. We've gotten away from that. We understand that that does not correlate with good pet families, or if someone's going to keep their pet. That we've got the data that's debunked that. And so the same thing, that same process, Kelly, for intake, instead of it just being utilitarian intake, the same energy, the same thinking goes into that when we're talking about managed intake. Just like I said, no kill, we picked the two negative words, we smushed them together. Managed intake, nobody wants to be managed. Managed does not have like a really good, for me, it doesn't. But
Mhm.
I'm also like a wild horse. Nobody wants to be managed. But the triage process, coordinated intakes, coordinated entry, I mean, whatever you call it, what matters is how you do it. And that do it process of managed intake is having a conversation with the people in front of you and finding out what brought them to you today. And if they're like, well, I want to
Mhm.
surrender my pet. Well, that's what we've been telling them to do for decades. You need to go a little bit deeper. What's going on in your life? It
Mhm.
could be that they need some behavioral help. It could be that they need some help with medical bills or veterinarian
Mhm.
issues. It could be that they are going to be unhoused and they need
Mhm.
temporary emergency foster. It could be there's and usually if somebody's dealing with something really personal, they may not feel comfortable talking to you when they're standing at a countertop, but they might feel comfortable when they have some privacy sitting down talking to you at a
Mhm.
table or a desk. So changing managed intake is changing that process of guaranteed entry, which is not always the best thing for the person or the pet,
Mhm.
and changing it to more of how we've done our adoption process, more of a conversation, more of a person caring about you and wanting to hear what's brought you to them today. And with lost pets, I found this dog, I'm driving to work. Um, the same thing, hey, we're full right now. If we gave you a crate and we gave you a bed and some food, do you think you could be a found foster for us? Maybe not now, you're on your way to work, but if you can come back, if you can help us, because most pets are lost right where they live. And
Mhm.
you've just driven it 15 miles away from its home, where the found foster program is really powerful. And maybe
Mhm.
they're on their way to work, but they can come back. and be a
Mhm.
temporary found foster for you. So managed intake really is about us being discerning. It's about developing rapport and trust and finding out if this is not a crisis and it's not an emergency, because if everything's an emergency, nothing's an emergency.
Mhm.
If this is not an emergency, we can solve for this later. You can make an appointment. We're going to give you this rehoming guide so you can rehome your pet yourself because you're not moving until next month.
Mhm.
And or the baby's you're expecting a baby, and uh we can find emergency foster, temporary foster for you. So when you get through this, you can come back and we'll, reunite you with your pet. So it's just
Mhm.
more of a common sense, compassionate way of dealing with it instead of this automatic assumption that the animal belongs in the shelter when we know statistically it's not true. That's a long answer.
No, it's a good answer. And I think it's so interesting because, and I've brought this up on the podcast before, and I am certain that this happens to you as well. But now that I'm in the animal rescue, specifically dog rescue space, I do get messages from people where they're like, oh, I have this dog I need to get rid of. Like I had one recently, and she's not a cousin, but she's related to my uncle, like, on the far side of the family, and we don't talk very often, and we're just friends on social media, as it sometimes goes, and she sent me a message, and she said, "Listen, I'm unfortunately, I'm really at my wit's end. I have this dog that we've had as a rescue for a number of years, but the dog is getting progressively more aggressive, and we've taken the dog to the vet and we've had a couple of different trainers come in, but I'm really worried about my kids. She has young kids, and I'm really worried about my family. And I just can't seem to find this dog a home. Is there any way that you can help?" And I just had a very honest conversation with her because I also think that it's really important that in this process that we have direct and honest answers for people, because then they can work with the best information that we have available for them. I said, "Listen, the reason you're having a hard time finding a shelter or a rescue to take this dog is because bringing in a dog that we know has aggression issues, where training has not worked, vet care has not worked, is a massive risk for that nonprofit." So it in the time that that animal is there, that animal is taking resources from the rescue, and it's now putting us in a situation where now this animal is going to be in a different environment. And is that going to exacerbate the issue that they're already having? I said, so if you have, because I think she did also say that the dog has a bite history. I said, so we can't take in this animal that has a bite history because the reality of it is we're probably not going to get that animal adopted out. And I was like, has your vet talked to you about behavioral euthanasia? And I know you don't love that word, but it is the word we're using today. And she said, yeah. And I think we might have to go that route. I said, listen, it's a very difficult decision. It sounds like you've exhausted your other options with, going to a vet, with going to a trainer, with going to a behaviorist, whatever that looked like. But the reality of it is, if other people and your kids are going to be at risk, it sounds like you may be in a position where you do have to make that decision. And she thanked me. I know it's not the answer that she wanted. She wanted me to be the savior for her and this dog that she does love. And I had to say that I can't do that. And I think that this kind of goes back to managed intake is directly tied to the no kill conversation, because it goes back to how do people in a no-kill setting become hoarders? And the reason that that can sometimes happen is because kind of instead on that front end, managing that intake, managing those expectations, it, is really, really important instead of just taking in every dog, taking in every animal, and then not having a plan for rehabilitation or where this animal could go. So managed intake is incredibly important. And it is really frustrating to see the responses of people where they go, well, if you don't take this dog, I'm just going to kill it myself. Or, I just, you are supposed to love animals. Why can't you take this dog? You're supposed to be a shelter. You're supposed to be a resource. Why can't you take this animal? Why can't you take this cat? Whatever the situation is. And there's so much more to it in order for the system to be positive and effective the whole way around.
Nope. 100%. Yeah, those are really case by case, very personal situations, and looking at all the factors, and that person knows their pet,
Hmm.
and they have to we have to do right by our animals.
Hmm. And sometimes that means making a very hard decision. And that can mean just making the most heartbreaking decision of your life. And for some reason, it seems easier when we're talking about something like cancer or an illness that we can see the actual medical side of it. But when it
Yep.
comes to behavior, the conversation shifts and the conversations becomes a lot about that person's responsibility to keep that animal alive. And while I do think that there are a number of people that give up very quickly and give up very, that they are trying to rehome without really giving it a real shot. I don't
Right.
think that was the case with the person that reached out to me. I just based on the message that she sent me, I do not think that was the case. So
Right.
I think it can be a compassionate and loving decision to say, this world is no longer working for you and it's putting both you and us in danger. And maybe we have to make a change that I don't like, but I have to accept.
Yeah. And that's, you mentioned this earlier about, no, there's people that think, well, no kills, no kill. You know, in Austin, when Austin first started on its journey, they were killing half of, 25,000 animals. They were killing every day. Um, it was it was a killing machine. And, we got it down, when I was the director, I think it was less than, I don't know, maybe 230 a year. And there were still people on social media that said we were killers. Um, I think that, um, I think that, we have a responsibility, to animals and to people and to the community and our society to make the right decisions and to do right by the community and do right by people and do right by the animal. And that's why we have that 10%. When people say, no kill, 90%, that might be good for Austin, or that might be good for Cincinnati, or that might be good in Portland or wherever we're talking about. But we can't do that here. Um, that 10% allows for that discretion where we do the right things. And when something is unprovoked, unpredictable, unpreventable, and you have to do the right thing. And that's why no kill definitely is not about hoarding. It's not about an animal living in a cage. That's not what Best Friends supports and believes. And it's not what I believe and support. It's why I'm with this organization. It's one of the most amazing organizations I've ever been part of. And I think, growing up an animal lover, I think I saw so many remarkable, amazing things done, and in these different organizations that are known for different initiatives and different causes, and for making the world a better place. For Best Friends, though, our primary focus is ending the killing of dogs and cats in shelters, and that doesn't mean hoarding. We don't believe an animal should live in a crate or a cage, and it doesn't mean unsafe communities. And it doesn't mean turning our backs on the community. When we talk about managed intake, modern contemporary sheltering is being a resource center for the community. It's helping people keep pets in their lives, and it's helping find new beginnings for pets that can't stay in their homes. And it's the hard decisions that have to be made by shelter leadership when it's a last resort, and we make those decisions. Um, it's a hard field. It's an emotional field, but so is working in a hospital, working in healthcare, social work, being a teacher. I grew up with a law enforcement family. My dad was a police officer in the Chicago area, in Cook County. And it was a tough profession. My mom was a librarian, and she worked really hard. She actually retired because it was that difficult. I have friends that teach. They're dealing with real human issues. I have friends in the medical field. And my point in bringing that all up is that we can't just crawl into the fetal position and say that, well, this field is, we're the only ones that are dealing with hard things. We're not the only ones. We're not alone. That's a noble profession, and it's really around social justice and equity, and it's around it touches public safety. It's an amazing profession. It's very rewarding. It can be very hard, but it's getting better. It's getting better because we're no longer. I think it's getting better. I think a lot of other people think it's getting better because we're not stuck on autopilot. We're not expecting animal lovers to do the unthinkable. We still have to do the tough stuff, but we also have primarily joy in our lives because we're about new beginnings. We're about life saving. And that's pretty cool. I tell the the field services officers, animal control, animal protection, uh, you know, when I was a director, I go, you all, when some of the directors some of the control officers fought me on changes. And I said, you can be like the hometown hero. You don't want people to run when they see your truck. You want
Uh,
people to like run up to it and want to have a
uh-huh,
conversation with you about why their dog got out and explain the gate's been left open or the gate's broken or your spouse let the dog out, forgot the dog was in the yard, went to work, the dog jumped over the fence. Have that conversation because they know that you're not just there to take their pet or to give them a
uh-huh.
ticket, that you're going to have a conversation with them. We basically are flipping the script on what animal services is known as in a community and, making it about just like parks and libraries. And we will help you solve problems. We're not here to hurt you. We want you to keep your pet if you can, and that's the best thing for you and that animal. And we're not going to take the life. In the past, we silently did that. We weren't honest with the community. Shelters were utilitarian. It was like leaves, snow, trash. Make it disappear. And
Uh-huh.
we're not, that's not like it anymore. That's not happening anymore. And it's the change around the United States. It's just so exciting. We just came out of our conference in Salt Lake City, and we were just looking at the data and the statistics around the United States. And it's exciting. It's a good time to be in this field. It's both stressful and exciting all at once because we still have a lot more work to do. But when you start to actually see that you can solve for something and you can see it happening, like statistically, it's like, if you were like trying to correct your blood pressure or lose weight or
Uh-huh.
change some marker, with your health and you actually see it happening, you get stoked. And that's what we're
Oh, I
seeing.
know.
Yeah. So it's cool.
So what is I truly believe that everybody has like the 30-second elevator pitch of their life, right? Like when you meet somebody for the first time and you're at a party and people say, "What do you do for a living? Tell me about the work that you do." Everybody has that like 30-second elevator pitch of something that they are so passionate about that they just want to get it across to everybody they possibly can. What is that one thing that Tawny Hammond wishes that everybody knew when it comes to animal rescue and welfare?
Yeah. Um, th- I think that one thing is that um, animal services as a profession and animal welfare as a movement is tied closely to social justice and equity and community wellness and people wellness. And you really can't separate the two. And that when you see people suffering, when you see housing insecurity, food insecurity, um, you see animals suffering. And so when we are investing in animals in our lives and in our communities and in our the departments, the nonprofits that make life saving a reality, we're investing in the people. We're investing in the fabric of our lives. We're investing in societal wellness, and that you can't separate the two. It's not just an animal issue. That that pets stave off loneliness and depression, and they connect us socially. They contribute to our economy, and so it's not a niche or a fringe field or area of concern. It's foundational. It's right up there with all the other services that make a community, a county, a city, a state, our country a good place to live.
That is so true and so well spoken. Thank you for sharing that. I think
Thank
this
you
is
for
a good
asking.
time for us to talk about one little tiny member of the community that needs a little bit of extra care. So I'm going to share my screen. So those of you that are following along on YouTube are now going to get to see Donnie. And this, I mean, when you talk about a dog with like pointy bat ears, this Donnie is absolutely just the cutest guy. So, Tawny, you are the one that made the connection with Cincinnati animalcare.org. And they really felt like Donnie needed a little extra special attention in the foster spotlight. So, why don't you tell me what you learned about Donnie?
Yeah, Donnie's, oh my gosh, she's so amazing. He's been at the shelter for like 290 days, and he's had a couple of foster homes. Um, he is an amazing boy. You know, he came to the shelter because it was kind of he wasn't in a good place, and so we're looking for a better place for him. And he is a big favorite of the shelter staff and the volunteers. He walks really easy on leash. He's super smart and he learns fast. He is a snuggler. And I mean, look at the face. Come on. And he is a snuggler. He he really just needs a person. He wants to be on a sofa. He wants to be watching TV. He wants to go for car rides. He's microchipped. He's vaccinated. He's super easygoing. You know, his energy level is not super high and it's not low. He's being passed over a lot. It's like right in the middle. Like it's like the perfect dog. Because if you say, "Let's go, Donnie," he goes. If you're like, "Donnie, we're watching the game," Donnie's like, "I'm there for you." And he's been passed over from fostering and from adopting because he's like that middle. He's 5 years old, approximately 5 years old, and people are wanting to foster special needs animals. They're wanting to foster maybe younger animals or older animals that need to get out of the shelter, that the elderly animals that need a little TLC. Where Donnie's just, he's not there. He's perfect. And that's kind of worked to his detriment. Um, One of the things they say too, though, that he gets really bonded with his person and his toys. We talked earlier about that. But that he's so smart that the staff there say that when you work with him and you talk, you're talking to him, that he's really responsive. They just can't believe how responsive he is. But he's ready to go home today. If someone's interested in adoption or they want to bring Donnie into their home, give him a break from that shelter, that really helps. You know this, Kelly. The
Hmm.
fostering really
It's
helps get a
massive.
pet adopted because their personality blossoms, it blooms, they relax, they sleep better, they rest better, they just present better.
Mhm.
And so he'd be a dream, I tell you what.
So you can find Donnie at cincinnatianimalcare.org. I am obviously going to share his profile as a link in the show notes. I did want to mention that it does look like he is um, other dog friendly with certain parameters of appropriate introduction and management of behavior. But the reality of it is, um, absolutely every dog to dog situation should have appropriate introduction and management of behavior. And then, as far as children are concerned, for those listening, it is recommended that he be in an adult only household because of his history of resource guarding. So, just like Tawny had mentioned, training is not just about teaching a dog behavior, it's also about teaching people behavior. And if you do have a dog that is um, more about resource guarding, it is going to be much more difficult to teach a child about those boundaries than it is an adult. So probably teenagers and up is going to be a better situation for Donnie. But it really is a beautiful dog, and who doesn't love a dog that's kind of ready to go at a moment's notice, but also ready to chill. I definitely don't want like 100% lazy dog, and I don't want 100% insane dog that can't find its chill. So Donnie really seems like an awesome, awesome dog. So make sure you check him out, and also make sure that you are supporting the efforts of Best Friends Animal Society. So, Tawny, can you please tell my listeners how they can connect with you and how they can connect with Best Friends?
Yeah. Well, best friends, you can connect with me. I'm Tawny, Tawny, um, at bestfriends.org. And best friends, if you want to, did you want to show our,
Sure, I can absolutely do that.
yeah, if you don't mind.
I don't mind at all.
And I'm
And
really,
again, for those that are following along on YouTube, I'm going to be pulling up Best Friends Animal Society's website.
yep, we're bestfriends.org. And, I just was looking at something on Donnie's profile real quick. Um, Thank you for all those clarifications. Those were so important that you added in on that.
Mm.
But yeah, you can follow us at bestfriends.org and learn all about us. If you want to learn more about our partnership with Southern Utah University and the certificate programs and the educational opportunities for animal services, that's on there. How to get involved, how to visit our sanctuary in Kanab. If you want to volunteer at the sanctuary, it's in a beautiful place between Zion and Bryce Canyon, the two gorgeous national parks. And we also have a lot of resources for animal shelters and animal service organizations and for people. We have a great magazine. We have a digital stories on our website. A couple I've written, but we have great writers that we tell the stories of life saving from around the United States. So please check out the page, and you'll hear it's just chock full of information, resources for how to uh, create a life saving animal services organization. We have playbooks and guides, all kinds of resources, and also beautiful stories. So our website is extremely robust. But I'm Tawny H at bestfriends.org. And I'm happy to connect you. If I can't help you, I'll connect you with who can. And this is an honor and a privilege for me to be doing this work. I consider this, Kelly, I consider this legacy. This is my legacy. That Thomas Jefferson put like three things on his tombstone. I think it was the author of the Declaration of Independence, the author of the Religious Freedom Bill, part of the Constitution, and then founder of the University of Virginia. Those are the three things he was that wanted to be known for, and I probably butchered the middle one, but for me, this is my legacy. Working with best friends, and making the world a better place for people and animals. And listen, I want to thank you for what you do.
Well, thank you so much for saying that, because ultimately I can't do this without people like you who are willing to share their knowledge and share the work that they're doing and share the organizations that they're working with and share their passion. And so I am so grateful to you for coming on the podcast today and connecting with me. I know you have so much going on right now. And so it's just truly a treat to connect with somebody at Best Friends, which is an organization that I cited information from your website in my very first episode. And so I just am truly, truly thrilled to have spoken with you today. And I wanted to just remind people how they can connect also with the podcast. So you can connect with the podcast at the Foster Files Podcast on Instagram. And on my Instagram page, I have a link to both my link tree, where you'll find some additional information. But also on my Instagram, you will find a link to subscribe to my monthly newsletter. And so today is May 31st. The day that we are recording is May 31st. And my second newsletter is coming out tomorrow, June 1st. So if you haven't already subscribed, make sure that you do so that you can get access to July's newsletter, where I'll talk about what's coming up on the podcast and any events or anything that's pertinent for information that I feel like you need to know. I do want to remind you that if you have somebody like Tawny that I should be speaking to, that you should send me an email at the fosterfilespodcast@gmail.com. But again, Tawny, I can't thank you enough for joining me today, for sharing your knowledge, for sharing your expertise. And it's just been such a pleasure to really explore some of the intricacies of what's going on in this world at a deeper level. So thank you so much for joining me today. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you and what you're doing. It bears repeating that the work you're doing is helping move our nation to that place where all pets are safe in shelters. So kudos to you and thank you for doing what you do. It was a pleasure being with you today, and discussing something really important. Thank you.
Really important. Well, thank you. And everyone, please remember, be kind to yourself and be kind to animals. Have a great day.